I glanced out of the floor-to-ceiling window of my downtown apartment, sunlight bouncing off the skyscrapers, and felt that familiar mix of pride and disbelief. Life had turned out unexpectedly beautiful, given the way it began. My silk blouse clung lightly to my shoulders, the soft fabric a stark contrast to the hardness I'd carried inside for years. My phone buzzed on the glass coffee table, and I almost didn't want to look. Almost. The message glowed on the screen. "Can you cover Emma and Jake's tuition? Mom says it's urgent." My fingers hovered, heart thumping. Emma and Jake, my mother's new children, who had been the reason I'd been shoved out at 17. I hadn't spoken to her in over a decade, and now, out of the blue, she wanted me to pay for the kids she'd chosen to raise while discarding me. I closed my eyes, remembering nights on strangers' couches, the sting of cold floors, the sound of my own quiet desperation. And yet here I was, not just surviving but thriving. My apartment smelled faintly of roasted coffee and fresh linen, the city buzzing beneath me. I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of old pain and the surge of triumph mixing together. A small, ironic smile crept across my face. She thought I'd stayed powerless, that I'd remained the scared, 17-year-old girl who had no choice. She had no idea. And honestly, it was about time she found out. I was 17, clutching the crumpled letter my mother had thrown at me like it was nothing. "I don't have time for you anymore, Claire," she had said, her voice cold and final. "You're in the way. The new kids, they need me." My hands trembled, the paper cutting into my palm, but the real sting came from the words themselves. I had been tossed aside, discarded for siblings I didn't even know yet. My bedroom smelled like old carpet and faded perfume, the sunlight filtering weakly through the blinds. My throat was tight, and I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to plead, but I knew it wouldn't matter. I had no home here anymore. The lump in my throat grew heavier with every step I took toward the door, every heartbeat marking my exile. Grandma's words echoed in my mind. "Claire, you have to make your own way, but never forget your worth. No one can take that from you." She had handed me a small, worn journal, the kind with lined pages that begged to be filled with dreams and plans. "Write everything down. Start with what you want, not what they want for you," she had said, squeezing my hand. That night, I packed what little I owned into a battered suitcase, the journal tucked firmly against my chest. I didn't know where I'd go, who I'd trust, or how I'd survive. But I did know one thing: I would not let her decision define me. I would not let being cast out turn me into someone small, invisible, or powerless. I stepped out into the night, the city lights flickering like tiny promises. Every step away from that house was painful, but also thrilling. Somewhere deep inside, I felt the first spark of defiance and hope, a whisper telling me I would, make a life that even she would have to notice someday. I remember the first night I slept on that stranger's couch, the city's hum outside my window a constant reminder that I was alone, but free. I clutched my worn journal, flipping through the blank pages like they were a promise. I didn't have much, just a small savings from odd jobs, a relentless drive, and the quiet voice of my grandmother echoing in my mind. "Know your worth." Within weeks, I found a part-time job at a small marketing firm. My boss, Mr. Callahan, was an older man with a sharp eye for talent and a soft spot for persistence. "You've got potential," he told me on my first day, handing me a stack of client proposals. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I worked nights, weekends, anytime I could, learning the ropes, figuring out strategy, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Some nights, my hands shook from exhaustion and anxiety. Some days, I questioned if I could really make it without the safety net I'd lost. But slowly, tiny victories started to appear. My first pitch was a success. The client smiled and shook my hand with genuine admiration. I saved every extra dollar, investing in online courses, books, and eventually a small co-working space. I kept my success secret from my family, posting vague updates on social media, careful not to reveal the growing empire I was building from scratch. Pride mingled with fear. What if they saw? What if they judged? Then I met Eliza, a seasoned entrepreneur who saw what I couldn't yet. A young woman with relentless ambition and the mind to match it. "Claire," she said one afternoon over coffee, "you're smarter than most people twice your age. Let's get you into the big leagues." She became my mentor, guiding me through the pitfalls of business, introducing me to clients who valued innovation over experience. Years passed, and my small hustle transformed into a thriving marketing consultancy with a clientele that stretched across states. I was careful, deliberate, and cautious, but the quiet pride that built with each success was intoxicating. I thought about the mother who had thrown me out, about the new children she raised while I struggled. She had no idea that the scared, 17-year-old girl she dismissed had become untouchable, self-made, and unstoppable. The knock at my office door was polite but hesitant, like someone stepping into territory they weren't sure they belonged in. I looked up from my desk, adjusting the cuff of my blouse, and saw her, my mother, Rachel, flanked by Emma and Jake. Their faces held a mixture of entitlement and uncertainty, as if they expected to see a struggling, timid girl who had barely survived without her family. I gestured to the leather chairs across from my polished oak desk. "Please have a seat." My voice was calm, measured, but inside, a storm of memories and triumphs roared. The office smelled faintly of polished wood and espresso, sunlight spilling across abstract paintings I had collected over the years, each piece a symbol of milestones and victories no one had noticed but me. For a long moment, they just looked around, taking in the elegance, the quiet power that seemed to radiate from every corner of the room. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Emma's eyes widened at the designer shelves filled with awards, books, and framed letters of appreciation from clients. Jake fidgeted in his chair, the confidence he had expected to intimidate me evaporating. I leaned back, folding my hands neatly on the desk. "I know you didn't expect this," I said slowly, letting my words sink in. "You thought Claire, the girl you tossed out at 17, would struggle forever, that she'd never amount to anything." My mother's gaze flickered, a shadow of guilt crossing her face. "Well, I did. I built my own company, my own life. I'm CEO, and my firm's net worth is in the 7 figures. Every client, every deal. I did it myself." Emma's jaw dropped. Jake's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. My mother's eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and shame. I let them absorb it, letting the silence do its work. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, the undeniable, radiant truth of my success. I watched them, steady and unflinching. "So, when you ask me to pay for their tuition," I said softly but firmly, "you should understand, I am not the scared, 17-year-old girl you cast aside. I am Claire, and this is my world now. Everything I've built, it belongs to me." Their stunned silence was all the confirmation I needed. The girl who had been thrown out had returned, not for pity, not for reconciliation, though that might come later, but for acknowledgement. The power had shifted, and they knew it. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of my presence fill the room. My mother's lips trembled, and Emma and Jake shifted nervously in their seats. I had the upper hand now, the choice, the leverage, the control, and I intended to use it wisely. "I'll consider helping with their tuition," I said slowly, letting each word land, "but there are conditions. I will not simply write a check to make your problems disappear." My mother's eyes widened, and I could almost see the resistance forming, ready to push back. I held up a hand. "Listen. First," I continued, "Emma and Jake must take responsibility for their own efforts in school. They cannot expect their grades, or their futures, to be carried by anyone else. I want to see progress, initiative, and accountability." Emma glanced at Jake, a flicker of defiance in her eyes, but I ignored it. "Second," I told my mother, "you must acknowledge the choices you made and the hurt you caused. You need to change your approach, stop repeating the same patterns that drove me away, and genuinely support your children's growth instead of expecting others to bail you out." Her jaw tightened, but I could see understanding beginning to crack through her denial. And third, I said, voice firm but calm, this is a chance for all of you to invest in yourselves, not just financially. Pursue your passions, learn skills, and stop leaning on old habits of entitlement. Growth is not about money. It's about effort, responsibility, and integrity. I watched their reactions, a mixture of guilt, shame, and reluctant respect. I wasn't just setting boundaries. I was creating space for transformation for them, for me. Compassion and firmness existed side by side in my tone. I cared, yes, but I would never let myself be manipulated or diminished again. For the first time, the room felt quiet in a different way, anticipatory, reflective. They realized that the powerless girl they had assumed I still was had been gone for years. She was replaced by someone unshakable, independent, and unafraid to demand respect and accountability. And if they wanted my help, they would have to earn it. Weeks passed after our meeting, and I watched the changes unfold quietly but deliberately. Emma started showing up for her tutoring sessions without reminders, finally taking ownership of her studies. Jake began volunteering at a local nonprofit, learning the value of effort beyond instant gratification. My mother, Rachel, began seeking advice from me, not as a supplicant, but as someone willing to learn, to grow, to repair the broken patterns that had once defined her. I often found myself reflecting on that night I left home at 17, clutching my grandmother's journal. That simple gift, her unwavering faith in my worth, had carried me through sleepless nights, doubts, and moments when giving up seemed easier. The same journal now sat on my office shelf, filled with notes of triumph, milestones, and lessons learned. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder of the girl who refused to be invisible. Sitting by the window one evening, the city lights glimmering like tiny sparks of possibility, I realized how far I had come. The pain of rejection had been real, but so was the power I had cultivated from it. The girl who had been cast out had returned stronger, wiser, and unafraid to demand respect, not just from others, but from herself. I smiled softly, brushing my fingers over the leather cover of the journal. Everything I had built, every challenge I had faced, had led to this moment, a space where love, accountability, and success could coexist. I had given them guidance, but I had also protected myself. And in that balance, I found peace. Some doors close, I whispered, almost to myself, but the ones you open with courage and faith, they lead exactly where you're meant to be.